Hello, good day everyone. Welcome back for another lecture in the subject Police Operational Planning. For those who haven't watched our lecture yet for the introduction on the subject matter, I would be putting the link on the description below for the previous lecture. So for today's lecture, we're going to be talking about the continuation of our discussion to the subject matter. We discussed already what is plan, the definition of plan, and what is planning, and also what is police planning. By the way, for just a short introduction, plan refers to an organized, scheduled, or sequence of methodological activities that intend to guide the attainment of the set goals and objective of certain activity or operation. So that is how we define plan in our previous discussion. So for today's topic, we will be talking about the basis of strategic planning, the process of strategic planning. And we're going to talk about also the objective of police planning, the guidelines in planning, source of policy plans, doctrines of police planning, types of police plan and procedural plan, and the types of special operation procedures, and the guide for creative planning. So at the end of the lecture, I would be hoping that everyone would appreciate and would have enough knowledge already on the background of police planning as it is applied to the PNP organization. So let's start with the phases of strategic planning. Okay, so we have at least 7 phases of strategic planning as I included in this lecture. For the first phase, we will be talking about the mission and objectives development. Before we would proceed in the formulation of a strategic plan, we should always be guided by the mission and objective of the organization. So, what is the reason? What is the reason for us to conduct planning? Because the mission and objectives, as well as the philosophy, will be the guidance in every organization or every institution in coming up with a plan. So what do you intend to do? That is the phase 1. So let's say, for example, in a certain organization, you wanted to provide a quality service to your stakeholders by year, let's say 2025, then that would be your vision. What do you intend to do in the next years to come? And what would be your philosophy? What would be your goal in the next years to come? It is very much important that we must be able to identify where do we want to go as an organization. So knowing that will guide you in coming up with the strategies, coming up with the procedures, and coming up with an efficient plan. So that's phase 1. Identify your mission and objectives. Because your mission and objectives will guide you on how you are going to be incorporating the significance and importance of planning in your organization. So you must have a goal set. You must have an objective set before you formulate a certain plan. So that's for the phase 1. Phase 2 talks about the determination of environmental threats and opportunities. You know, in every operation, especially in the law enforcement, it is very much important that we consider the environmental factor, the location to which we're going to be conducting whatever operation that you intend to conduct. And in consideration of the environmental factor, we must see to it that we would be able to identify all the environmental threats and, of course, the strength or opportunities we will encounter in that certain operations. So that gives now the importance of the conduct of surveillance and other operation that is relative to this. So as to able to gain or collect data that we can be able to use in coming up with a plan. So you must look into the environmental factors also. Let's say, for example, you need to conduct buy-bust operation. Where are you going to conduct the operation? And what are the possible threats in that area? What are the possible opportunities that you may be encountering in that area? So are there any bystander who could pose threat in the operation? Do we have any organization or any groups that may affect or makes our operation non-productive? All of those things should be taken into consideration. The environmental threats and also the opportunities. Take advantage of all the possible opportunities that you may encounter in that specific location. And for the next phase, we have the assessment of organizational strength and weaknesses. As you can see on the second lecture that we conducted, we discussed how the quotation of Sun Tzu from his Art of War might be able to benefit us when we conduct planning. So we go back to that stanza wherein it says, know your enemy and know yourself, and you need not to fear the result of 100 battle. Basically, that's the idea of the phase 3. Know your strength, know the organization's strength and weaknesses in order to come up with an efficient plan. So if you know, for example, that you are lacking of personnel, that is your weakness as an organization. You don't have enough personnel to do the job, to do the operation, then definitely you might consider adding up some personnel in order to augment the organization's weakness. What about your strengths as an organization? What are your strengths as an organization? Do you have enough resources? Do you have enough connection? Do you have enough personnels to be deployed in that operation? Then take advantage of all those things that you have in order to develop a more efficient plan. Phase 4 talks about the formulation of alternative strategies. There are instances wherein we have already conceptualized a very ideal plan. However, there are instances or events which affects or the implementation of the plan that we conceptualize. So, as I've stated, it's not enough to have plan A alone. In every plan that we conduct, we must take into consideration formulating an alternative plan. What if these things happen? What if these things exist? Let's say, for example, you're going to be conducting a buy-bust operation. So you planned everything already, but then you didn't took into consideration the instances wherein somebody could intervene or someone could tip off the bad guy who you are supposed to be arresting at that time. Then what would happen? It will make the operation unsuccessful if we don't have alternative plan. In that buy-bust operation alone, it's not just enough to come up with one plan only. It's really underestimating the problem that we are going to be encountering. So aside from plan A, you must make a plan B, plan C, and possible plan D. So for buy-bust, for example, what are your plans if the persons to whom you would be arresting was tipped off? Or what are your plans if, for example, the person who you should be arresting did not show himself in that area. So take those into consideration in formulating a plan. You must always make or develop an alternative plan in case things will go wrong. We have also the phase 5, the collation of data to develop a strategic plan. So what does it mean by collation of data? So we have all the mission, we have determined the environmental threats and opportunities, we have assessed already our strengths and weaknesses, then we formulated already an alternative plan. We collate all the data that we develop, the information that we gathered through these phases, then that is now the proper time for us to formulate a strategic plan. So before you can formulate a strategic plan, consider first the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. If you were able to provide sufficient data already on these 4 phases, then that's the only time that you should be formulating already your strategic plan. After formulating your strategic plan, what you should do next is to come up with tactical plan. As you can see, strategic plan is like a general plan that can be applied in a certain mission, in a certain activity. After coming up with that plan, you ask yourself, how am I going to achieve this strategic plan? How am I going to accomplish the objectives that I have written in this strategic plan? So that is now where the development of tactical plan will push through. Okay? So, in the strategic planning, we're talking about much more on an organizational plan, on a broader plan, wherein we might aim something that is broad in nature. Tactical plan talks about how are we going to achieve the goals that we have written under the strategic plan. So there are a lot of circumstances wherein we need a specific plan in order to collate all the data that we have been setting under the strategic plan. Okay? Then, after coming up with the tactical plan or the procedure on how are we going to achieve our strategic plan, then that is the time that we will make an evaluation. It's not wrong to conduct dry run. Actually, in every operation that we should be conducting as an organization, look into the possibility of making an honest evaluation. Let's say you're going to conduct, again, the bypass as an example. Then, do not proceed in the conduct of bypass operation without first evaluating all the procedures that you have laid down during the planning session. It is also important to conduct a dry run in order to determine the possibilities of issues or problems you might encounter in the implementation of the plans that you develop. So evaluation process is much or very much importance before you conduct the operation. You have the plan, you set the strategies on how you're going to conduct and achieve it, then evaluate. If everything is already polished up to its smallest detail. Now, if you notice that during the evaluation process, you notice some problems, then you go back to the previous phases and come up again with a solution and come up again with another strategy in order to polish everything. As Sun Tzu stated, the battle is won before it happens. So he talks about perfecting in the every aspect of the operation before the actual implementation. So evaluation process is very much important. So those are the phases of the strategic planning process. Okay? For the next topic, we will be talking about the objectives of police planning. Why do we need to conduct planning, especially in the law enforcement organization? First objective of police planning is definitely to increase the chances of success by focusing on the result and not on the objectives. During the planning process, the result should be the focus. Because if we're just looking into the objective without taking seriously whether we are going to have a positive result, then definitely there is a problem. It seems like that we have the characteristic of bahala na, which is very bad. So if we focus on the objective without considering whether we will gain a positive result, then there is a problem with regards to that. That is why we plan, because we wanted the result to be successful. But then, if we would allow our bahala na characteristic, then definitely the planning session that we conducted was very much useless. So we focus on the result. Okay? We focus on the positive result. If you are determined to achieve a positive result, then nothing will go wrong. Next objective of police planning is to establish a framework for decision making that is consistent with the organizational goal. We plan because we don't want to be reactive. We don't want to be rattled by the problem that we are going to be encountering when we conduct the operation. In doing that, in so doing that, we also plan in order to make everything proper. Proper to the point that it is aligned to our organizational goal. Because sometimes, if we don't plan, then we proceed immediately into the conduct of operation. We sometimes forget the objectives of our organization. We sometimes forget the policies that we have as an organization. So that is why they would justify that it is a call of duty. But then, if we have polished everything in the planning session, procedures and policies of the organization as well as the goals of the organization was ingrained already into the personnel who would be conducting the operation, then definitely they will never go wrong. Then lastly, we have to orient the member of the law enforcement to be proactive and not reactive. That is why we plan. The purpose of this is for us to be ready all the time. We don't want personnel to be reactive because sometimes, or not 100%, our reaction is always correct. The manner how we respond in a certain incident may be sometimes be affected by our emotion, by nervousness and so on. That is why we do planning so that the personnel is always prepared in whatever incidents he will be facing in the line of his duty. So that is one of the important objectives of police planning. We plan so as for us to be prepared all the time. Proactive, not reactive. Okay, so next that we will be discussing is the guidelines in planning. What about the guidelines in planning? The guidelines in planning is definitely guided by the cardinal questions. We have the 5 W's and 1 H. What, why, when, where, how, and who and how. So those are the 5 cardinal questions that we must answer before we do the operation. What pertains to what are the mission's objective? As we have stated on the phase 1 of developing a strategic plan, we must determine what would be or what is our objective. What is our mission? So if we determine what should we do or what to do, we are already putting up a base on how we will be conducting the operation. Next is why. Why? Why do we need to conduct the operation? Why do we need to perform this certain task? So why answers the mission's rationale? Why do we need to do this? Why do we need to do that? Why do we need to arrest those individuals who are committing crime? Why do we need to crack down all those individuals who are involved in drugs, for example? So we must determine the purpose of the mission that we are conducting for us to come up with a better strategy before we do the operation. Next is when. When talks about the critical time. Let's say, for example, you're going to arrest a certain individual. Should you conduct it at daytime or should you conduct it at nighttime? When, what date? Are you going to conduct it on Monday, on Tuesday, Wednesday, or or the other days? So when is very important also. You must take into consideration also the time factor. Because, you see, even if sometimes you don't notice, but there is a proper time actually to be conducting an operation. So if you're going to raid someone, would you conduct it at daytime? To which maybe he was not present at the location. Or probably there are too many people who will get involved if you would be conducting that in daytime. So, do you think it is better to conduct it at nighttime wherein people are already inside their home, resting, and so on, and probably your subject will be also present in the place wherein you're going to be conducting the operation. So if you're going after a group of rebel, so if you're going after a group of criminal, do you think it's better to capture them during nighttime or daytime? If you're going to conduct it at nighttime, at what specific hour do you think it's best for you to succeed? So all of those things will be answered on the when question. Consider the critical time, the best possible time for you to succeed in whatever operation you will be conducting. Next is the where, location. So we're talking about location when we talk about where. Where will you be conducting the operation? So as you can see, during the first discussion that we have regarding the phases of strategic planning, we talk about the determination of environmental threats and opportunities. If you're going to set a location, especially during the conduct of bypass, sometimes it is you who will decide, but most of the time also it is them. It is the bad guy or the criminals who will be deciding where to meet up. But if you have the control over the location, if you have control over the place where this transaction will be happening, then take advantage of all possible opportunities that you could have in selecting the location. But let's say, for example, you don't have the control, then take into consideration all the possible threats that are present in the area to which the operation will be conducted. So if that is like an encounter between the law enforcement personnel, between the rebel groups, then before you engage, take into consideration the location, wherein there might be possible threats present in there might be possible groups that would be involved, and there might be possible backdoor to which they can escape, and all of those data that is relative to the where question, to the location which the operation will be conducted. And the fifth one would be who. Who will be conducting the operation? This question pertains to the personnel who will be involved in this operation. Do we need to involve 100 personnel for that operation, or do we need to involve lesser? Who will be the subject of the operation? According to Sun Tzu, know your enemy. So it is important also for us to know who are these people who will be the subject of the operation. What are their possible connection and strengths? We don't know. Maybe some of them are already some of the member of the law enforcement organization was indeed in the payroll of that organization. So that could make the operation less successful or a failure. So who must answer the persons to be involved and the persons who will be subjected to the operation. And last is the how question. How are we going to conduct the operation? This question answers what strategy will be used in the conduct of the operation or in the implementation of the operation. So I do believe that if you're answering the how question already, you come up already with a tactical plan, alternative plan, and so on. So those are the cardinal questions that we must answer before we conduct an operation. If we have provided sufficient information already to answer this cardinal question, then definitely there is a bigger tendency that our plan will be efficient. Next topic, we have the source of policy plans. You know, policy plans is laid down by the management, by the persons who hold the managerial position. So we have two types of policy. We have external policy and we have internal policy. When we talk about external policy, these are policy laid down by the legislative branch of the government. So these are the policies created by the national government. It is mandated by law. It is created by a certain law and so on. So those are external policies. Okay? So, you know, if a law is created, then it requires the concerned organization to come up with an implementing rules and regulation, or the IRR. And the IRR is being created, as I've stated, by the concerned organization. So let's say, for example, we have the Republic Act 9165. It provides policies with regards to the use of dangerous drug, the manufacture, selling, distribution, and many more prohibited acts involving drugs in our country. So that is basically an external policy created by our legislative branch, created by the legislative branch of the government. Then, in that law, it requires now the creation of a certain organization who will be focusing on this drug problem. So let's say, for example, the PDEA, the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency. Now, let's say, for example, that organization is now tasked to come up with an internal policy wherein it discusses how they can be able to accomplish the policy laid down by Republic Act 9165. So it involves now the rules on how they're going to conduct arrests, how are they going to conduct bypass operation, and many more internal policy. So those are the source of policy plan. We have two, external policy and then internal policy. External policy are those policies, procedures, laws created by the legislative branch, laid down by the legislative branch. And internal policy are those policies formulated by the law enforcement organization in response to the policy laid down by the legislative branch. Next up, we have the doctrines of police planning. So we have two doctrines, the primary and we have the secondary doctrines. First, on the primary doctrines, we have fundamental doctrine. Fundamental doctrine refers to the plan formulated in order to guide the organization to attain its vision, mission, and objectives. So generally, these are the procedures. So generally, in coming up with a plan, if there is a general plan, then that is or it belongs to the fundamental doctrine, wherein the plan is focused on the broad procedure on how you're going to attain the vision, mission, and objective of a certain organization. Next is the operational doctrine. In operational doctrine, we formulate a plan wherein it provides the specific procedure on how we're going to attain the fundamental doctrine or the general plan that our institution or organization had formulated. In the previous lecture that we have, let's say we wanted to eradicate drug user in our country in this specific year. So let's say the fundamental doctrine demands that Philippines should be a drug-free country already. Then the operational doctrine discusses how can we make the Philippines a drug-free country. So that is basically the function of operational doctrine. It provides procedure on how are we going to attain the general objectives, the vision and mission of our organization. And lastly, we have the functional doctrine. It provides guidance for specialized activities such as, in the PNP organization, we have a lot of functional units. So we have, for example, the intelligence division, the operation division, the logistic, and others. So under the functional doctrines, it provides now the specific procedure that must be followed by these specific units. How will the intelligence division perform their task and responsibility as a unit? That would be discussed under the functional doctrine. Then we have the secondary doctrine, the complementary doctrine, which talks about cooperation, the significance of cooperation, not only within a certain organization, but in coordination with other relative organizations. So you see that if this different organization is indeed well coordinated, it would help the formulation of plan much efficient, and it would render the operation much successful because it does not only involve one organization but many organizations working together in order to attain the objectives, goals, and mission of a certain organization. So that's complementary doctrine. Cooperation between different organizations in order to come up with a better plan and in order to succeed in the conduct of the operation. So in the drug operation, it does not only involve one agency. It does not only involve the PNP organization alone. It might involve other agencies of the government coming in together in order to make this drug war successful in favor of the government. Then, of course, we have the ethical doctrine, which talks about the governing rules of conduct, attitude, and ethical norm of the PNP organization. Okay, so under the ethical, in the performance of this, in the performance of, or in the implementation of the certain operation, we must look into consideration also that we do not violate any human rights of the individuals involved. We do not violate the constitutional rights and other types of rights. So that's when the ethical doctrine plays part. Okay? Next on the topic, we have types of police plan. We have a lot of types of police plan that includes reactive plan. Reactive plan talks about plans that are developed as a result of crisis. So let's say, for example, something happens, how are we going to respond into it? So it was not planned, but then it came about when the crisis already arises. So that's reactive, which, as we have stated, it's not an ideal way on how we deal with a certain problem or a certain crisis. Things can be predictable unless maybe there are some instances wherein it really was not think of, or it was not really not, or it was not really considered to happen. But the majority of the problem that exists, or majority of the problems that the PNP or the law enforcement organization encounters are actually predictable. Let's say, for example, terrorist attack. That is predictable. Sometimes or someday that can happen. So we must plan for it. So we must formulate a plan ahead of time. Maybe something like zombie invasion is unpredictable. So, but then we cannot say that it will not happen. So maybe the PNP organization has already developed a plan if in case there would be a zombie attack. I'm not saying that it's not possible, but then it's better to have plan relative to that than have nothing at all and then it really happened. And we hope it will not. Or maybe an alien invasion will transpire in year 2050 or 2040. Do we have a plan for that? So things like that. Although you can say that's very insane, but then it's better to have plan relative to this than have nothing at all. Okay? Next is we have proactive plan. That's what I'm talking about. Proactive plan. Proactive plan talks about a plan that was developed in anticipation of a certain problem. In this modern world, nothing is impossible. We have cyber criminals already. I believe the PNP organization had planned that ahead, that someday the cyber criminals will raise. And it's better to have a proactive plan that will combat those types of problems, which has a tendency to exist. So when we're talking about alien invasion, zombie invasion, it's better to have a proactive plan relative to that. Because if things like that happen, but we didn't consider it because we are saying that it's foolish, then definitely it's the loss of the nation. Then we have strategic plan. Strategic plan talks about the long-range plan. It allows the organization to adapt into anticipated changes or develop a new philosophy in policing model. So for example, our current situation today, pandemic. Do we have a plan? Did we plan ahead of time that things like this will happen? Maybe we did not because we said, it's foolish. But our history teaches us that this can happen because it already happened long time ago. So why don't we have any functional, established plan that combats this thing? Why is only now that we formulate these laws that governs these things, like for example the Bayanihan law and so on? I do believe there are laws also that was enacted that anticipates the existence of a pandemic, of a global pandemic, but I don't know why it seems we are very much unprepared, or every nation in the globe are very much unprepared in combating this problem, which in fact this thing happened already in the past. So it seems we are not learning from experience if that's the case. So a strategic plan talks about those possible changes that will transpire in the nearest future. long-term. Strategic plan is long-term. It may take a decade or it may take a century. Who knows? No? But then we try to see that there are possible changes that will happen and we prepare for those changes. So every organization must have a strategic plan for at least a decade or so, because things are changing rapidly in these modern days. Before, we do not expect cyber criminals, but then there is already individuals before who created much damage in creating virus or by hacking a computer system and so on. So those things must be taken into consideration by all organizations, whether you are in law enforcement or health or finances and so on. You must have a strategic plan prepared for the possible changes or possible events that will happen in the future. Next is we have the operational plan. Operational plan is designed to meet a specific task required to achieve a strategic plan. So if you have a strategic plan, you must also have an operational plan for that. So let's say, for example, in year 2000, you have already predicted the increase of cybercrime by year 2010. So if you had a prediction that those things will happen in year 2010, then what action did you do in order to prepare the organization in combating the existence of that problem in the near future? Did you formulated seminars to enable your personnel to be prepared, to be knowledgeable in computers, in computer programming, and so on? Did you prepare for the equipment? Did you invest in acquiring equipments that can possibly detect cyber criminals or apprehend cyber criminals? So those are the questions that we must ask. Because if you have a strategic plan, you cannot just make a promulgation that you would do this in this year, that you will achieve this by these years. So in this specific year. So if you have formulated those for promulgation, the vision and mission, you must develop also an operational plan on how are you going to achieve those promulgations that you made on the strategic planning, on the strategic plans that you have. So that's the importance of the operational plan. Functional plan. It talks about the frameworks on how the different units will function. When you created a specific unit for that specific task and you already mobilized them, you must also develop a procedure or guidelines for them to follow. So for example, in the FBI, they have a lot of units. Every unit created there in anticipation of an event is provided with a guidelines on how they are going to function as a unit. So if you develop or if you created a certain unit to combat a certain type of crime, then you must provide also how they will function as a unit. Because giving a task to a certain organization without providing a guideline on how they're going to function, on how are they going to achieve the goal and objective of their unit, will make the case more less productive. Okay? So it's very important also to develop a functional plan in anticipation to the strategic plan and operational plan that you created. We have also the type of plan which is considered as time-specific plan. These time-specific plans their significance is very short, as they only answers or as they only provide information for a specific problem which dies out later on. For example, quarantine procedure. Maybe that's just a time-specific plan. It only exists as long as the problem on the pandemic still exists. But once it is no longer a problem, then those plans are no longer functional. They have no longer any significance. So our procedure with regards to quarantine will only stay as long as there is still the problem on the pandemic. But when these things are all gone, then so as the procedure on the quarantine things that we have today. So those are time specific. They're only bound to be functional as long as their significance is still there. But once they are no longer, but once the problem no longer exists, then the plan is already, or the procedures established is already useless. So those are the different types of plan. So we are now down in the PNP procedural plan, which we know as the standard operating procedure or the SOP. Procedural plan or the standard operating procedure pertains to the result of a careful planning in order to guide the law enforcers in the field. So this discusses how the different personnels in the field will function as a member of the organization. So we're talking about field procedure, headquarter procedure, special operation procedure. Under the field procedure, these are the procedures that must be followed by the personnel while doing their tasks and responsibilities in the field. So this involves, like, for example, raid operation, or arrest. How are they going to conduct arrest? How are they going to deal with the community? How are they going to conduct investigation? And how are they going to conduct patrol, and so on. So all of these things are field works. Now, in every responsibilities given to them, there is a specific method or procedure on how are you going to function. Let's say, for example, you as a police officer was patrolling a certain area, then a certain crime broke out. Now you need to conduct an arrest, or you need to apprehend the person. In apprehending the person, there is a specific procedure that must be followed, given or provided by the organization. So if those are not followed, put the method on how the duty was performed in question. And a lot of those things are happening. Sometimes those will lead to the dismissal of the case because the procedure was not followed. As you can see, when it comes to court presentation, it's very technical. So we must follow what is given or what is laid down by the policy-making body of the organization. So what was provided must be followed. Now we talk about the headquarter procedure. So what about headquarter procedure? Those personnel who was left out in the headquarters have their own functions to perform also. They might not be conducting patrol, but they're also doing like writing a police blotter, making incident report, and issuing police clearance. What else? A lot of functions that involves the personnel who are present in the headquarters. So they're also provided with procedures on how are they going to perform their responsibilities. So let's say, for example, police community relation. Because police community relation is not only present in the field, is not only a field work. It might be most of the time an office work, since people will come into the police station, police offices, to report to report a crime, and so on. So these personnel who are facing or receiving complaints and so on, they have a specific procedure. They are following a specific procedure in everything they do. So those are the headquarters procedure. Then we have special operation procedure. Well, there are instances wherein things like unforeseen event transpired and there's a need to come up or develop a certain unit to face that specific problem, then those are the reason why they develop also special operation procedure. You know, a good example for this is, like, for example, we have a sensational case. Like, for example, Mayor Halili was assassinated, and the PNP created a task force that specifically investigate the case of Mayor Halili. So with that special unit, they must develop also a special operation procedure on how are they going to conduct their investigation based on the specific task that was given to them. But of course, the procedure will be based on the general procedure that is already existing within the organization. Other examples of special operation procedures are tactical procedures. You know, these are in order to cope up with the current situation or demands, they need to conduct a tactical procedure. Police officers are not only focused on law enforcement and so on, but they also focus, sometimes their assistance is also needed for peace and order, crowd control, security assistance, and so on. Let's say, for example, a well-known singer, international singer, will be conducting a concert here in our place, then the organizer would be requesting the assistance of the PNP organization to help in securing the VIPs, help in securing the participants in that concert, and so on. So they must conduct, or they must come up with a specific procedure on how they're going to address the demand at that specific time. So that is a good example of tactical procedure. We have also operational procedures. So for special divisions, these are procedures developed to accomplish a given task. As we are talking about kanina, we have sensational cases are being assigned to a special unit who have one focus, which is to provide answer for that specific question that would enlighten the reason or enlighten everyone regarding the case that was being assigned to them. So those are operational procedure. Regular operating procedure talks about, you know, the responsibilities of each and every one. Like, for example, duty hours, who is on duty at that specific day, how many days should a police officer should render duty, how long should he render duty. All of those things are part of the regular operating procedures. Then, lastly, we have creative planning. Creative planning, in order for us to make or create an efficient plan, we must take into consideration the following. First is imitation. Imitation talks about the adaptation of plans developed by other agency or organization. Well, it's not bad to imitate a certain procedure, certain plan, which was proven successful. Because if the purpose of this imitation is to make the operation more, or to increase the operation's chances of success, then definitely it's a good thing to do. That's why in the curriculum of criminology, we are studying policing system, comparative policing system. We are comparing the policing system of our country to the different country in order to come up with a better policing system. Because there might be some policing system that renders a very productive result applied or being applied in another country that we can adapt. So when it comes to planning, we must have the same, we must do the same. We try to see, in this specific agency, when they were facing this type of problem, what action did they do? So we can recreate those types of procedures that they adopted and help us in formulating our own plan. So it's okay. It's not always bad to imitate as long as, again, the purpose is to make the operation much more successful. Then definitely we should go for it. As long as maybe we don't take the honor of, formulating that plan. We make a reference on where did we get the idea in coming up with that plan. So as we cannot be blamed for plagiarism and so on, because the planning is a result of many procedures that is tiresome sometimes. Okay, so that's imitation. Then we have also the inductive planning. So we have inductive planning wherein our plans develop from small scales. Then from that small scale, it progresses into much bigger plan. For example, we wanted to lessen the criminality in that area. So what should we do? What can we do to lessen the criminality in that area? Maybe we go to each and everyone's home, educate them with regards to crime prevention, crime victimization, and so on. So we do it little by little. Then what if we level that up and we make it like in a regional scale? Then we make it a national scale. So originally our plan was, like for example, the Tokhang is a good example. Tokhang is already being conducted in the hometown of our president. Then later on, they adopted that type of procedure and applied it nationwide. So that is a good type of example that we can provide to have a better idea with regards to inductive planning and inductive procedure. So they plan up on how are they going to resolve the drug problem in that certain city. Then later on, they tested and they proved, or they had enough data to prove that, it's actually good. So they adopted it and applied it nationwide. So we can do that. We can make a plan that will address a specific problem. Then from that problem, we develop a more broad strategy that can be applied to the general public. Okay? We have deductive planning, which the concept is we make a plan which is broad in nature, that is most of the time how we come up with a policy. We conceptualize a big plan, a broad plan, then later on, piece by piece, we develop plan. So let's say for example, we wanted to make our country a safe place, a safe country for everyone. So that's how we conceptualize that. We might be planning about we enhance the law enforcement capability of the PNP. We equip our PNP with firearms and so on. We recruit more members of the PNP so that it would be placing the PNP organization in an ideal ratio between the client and the PNP and so on. So maybe piece by piece we develop plan on how are we going to achieve a certain part of that broad plan in order to make it more effective. So we have the big plan, then we develop plan from those things, small plans from those things that will complement each other and achieve or help in the achievement of the broad plan that we have. So that is deductive planning. We develop a broad plan, and from that broad plan, we are going to come up with a smaller plan which help or complement with each other in order to achieve the general plan that we have. And of course, we have the complementary plan or complementary planning. As we have stated, Complementary talks about the cooperation between different organizations in order to come up with a better plan. So it's always good to have more personals involved in coming up or formulating a certain plan. Because as I've stated, we have the quotation, two heads are better than one. So definitely two agencies or three agencies is better than one agency developing a plan that would affect the general populace. Okay, so those are our topic for this lecture. I do hope that we were able to, or you were able to learn something from those discussions. If you have questions regarding to this discussion, comment it down below and I will try to provide answer as soon as I can. Thank you for listening. See you next time.